Hello, my name is Jay Emery, and I am co-president along with Joan Matula of the League of Women Voters of Moore County. I would like to welcome you to the League's 2020 Candidate Conversations. These conversations are part of the League's efforts to help voters learn more about their candidates and the issues, and to get to know them better as people. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political candidate. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. For 100 years, the League has stood firm in the belief that government has a responsibility to represent and serve the people, not individuals in power. And now I will turn the conversation over to Carolyn Mealing, who will be talking with our candidate today.
Thank you, Jay. We're so very pleased to have with us today Judge Tiffany Bartholomew, Democratic candidate for North Carolina District Court, District 19D, Seat 4. I do want to announce that both candidates for this seat were invited to participate, but Judge Steve Bybee declined our invitation. Judge Tiffany, would you like to begin by telling us why you're running for District Court Judge, District 19D, Seat 4, and how your background and experience have prepared you for this seat?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is my name is Tiffany Bartholomew. I'm a District Court Judge in Moore and Hope County. And what this race really comes down to is who can you trust to make the right decisions when it comes to your family and your freedoms. My entire legal career has been in public service. After I graduated from law school, I became an assistant district attorney. I prosecuted in Moore County for almost 10 years before I was appointed to the bench by Governor Cooper. When I was an assistant district attorney in Moore County, after doing some years in district court, I moved up to the superior court level where I prosecuted primarily domestic violence, sexual assaults, and child abuse cases. And I'll be really honest with you, I was really good at my job. I loved what I did. Moore County had one of the highest conviction rates for sexual assaults in the state of North Carolina. I instituted an technique with law enforcement in investigating domestic violence cases. We used evidence-based prosecution, which really increased our ability to successfully prosecute domestic violence cases and my time there, to the point where Friend to Friend actually recognized me in 2017 as their outstanding community partner. But by far, my proudest achievement when I was with the Moore County District Attorney's Office was opening up the Moore County Children's Advocacy Center. When I started prosecuting child abuse cases, I recognized that there was no one-stop place in Moore County where children who were the victims of abuse and neglect could go to receive services. Children were having to wait 6 to 8 weeks to go up to Chapel Hill just to be seen for a medical exam. And so with a lot of hard work, I met with some community partners and we got the Moore County Children's Advocacy Center opened. And now I can proudly say that children in Moore County have access to a one-stop shop where they can receive a forensic interview from a neutral, non-biased interviewer. They can receive medical exams and even follow-up services like therapy. So why did I actually leave a job that I really enjoyed so much? Well, I left my job to get the appointment because I really felt like somebody with my experience and expertise could provide a lot of benefit to the bench. So now as a district court judge, I preside over a variety of different courts, everything from child support court to criminal court, juvenile court, where we actually handle abuse, neglect, and dependency cases. And I'm also a family court judge. I'm one of 2 family court judges in Moore County where we handle child custody matters, child support matters, alimony, and equitable distribution. So I definitely believe that I'm the most qualified candidate when it comes to the prerequisite legal knowledge that's needed to be an effective judge on the bench. But on top of that, I also think I have the right judicial temperament. Everybody who walks into my courtroom is going to be treated with respect. Right now, it's just really important that people understand the process and really be given an opportunity to be heard. That's really what people are looking for. Even if they're not going to agree with how you decide their case, they want to feel like they were treated fairly in the process. And I really work on making sure that that happens when people come into my courtroom. And on top of that, I'm just very involved in the community because it's a community that I really do care about. On the board for the Sand Hills Boys and Girls Club, I participate in a mentoring program at Pinecrest High School called Women Empowering Young Women. I'm an active member of the Moore County NAACP. I was proudly just announced their Woman of the Year candidate or actually won it for 2020. And I'm also involved in the Hope County Civic League. And probably one of the things that I enjoy the most is I'm a youth basketball coach. So I'm really hoping that we can get through this pandemic and I can make sure that I coach my team again this year. I coached for Pinehurst Parks and Recs last year and we won the season. So I'm hoping that I can repeat there and also be victorious in November.
Well, thank you so much. We sent a few questions to Judge Tiffany prior to this interview, and now we'll ask her that first question. What do you consider the greatest obstacles to achieving justice for all?
So right now, when I've been talking to people, I've found out that there's just a lot of basic mistrust in the system in general, not just in the criminal side, but also in the civil side. So every day when I take the bench, I work to restore people's faith in the system. And I do that by making sure that they know when they come in the courtroom, they're going to be treated fairly. The facts are going to be applied to the law, and that's going to be the outcome that they receive. And I think people really appreciate that. I think that also sort of ties into, we've been seeing sort of an effort to politicize the judiciary. And that's concerning to me as a judge, because when I'm sitting on the bench, I don't know anybody's political affiliation. It doesn't matter to me. And the same law is going to be applied either way. But I get nervous when I hear people referring to themselves as either conservative or liberal, because I think it sort of implies that you're going to already rule a certain way in a case, which is the exact opposite of what should be happening. When I was a prosecutor, the worst feeling in the world was going into a courtroom and knowing that no matter what you said, even if you had the law on your side, that the judge was just going to do what the judge wanted to do. And I just think that when you start to make implications like that, it gets to be really dangerous. And I think it leads to people thinking that they're not going to get a fair shake. I think we have to do a lot more on our part in the judiciary by ensuring people that it doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't matter how much money you have, that's not how you access justice. And so I think those are really the biggest impediments to justice for all right now.
Thank you. Our next question, in what ways has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the court system and court cases, and what would you suggest to address these issues?
Sure. So like pretty much everybody else, the court system shut down in the middle of March, and we didn't really fully reopen until the beginning of June. So we had a good 2.5 months where we were only hearing emergency matters in the court system. So we were still making sure that if people were requesting domestic violence protection orders, that they could come in, or an emergency custody order. And there were certain criminal matters that constitutionally we had to make sure that we were affording people access to an attorney, access to a probable cause hearing. So we still made sure that we were addressing those issues. But other than that, we were unable to really conduct our regular court's business. And so as you can guess, that put us pretty far behind. I've already said that I was a family court attorney. And so not having family court for 2.5 months, we lost a lot of very valuable court time. So I think in order to make up for that, what we have to do is we have to prioritize making sure that we're getting temporary orders in place. So we're prioritizing the new cases that came in, making sure that we at least have a temporary order until we can actually have a permanent hearing on those issues. But that way we can give families some sort of opinion on what's going to be happening, and they can sort of plan with that instead of having nothing in place for a really long time. That can really be detrimental to children, especially in custody cases. When it comes to the criminal side, in district court, some people don't realize that jury trials only happen at the superior court level. So in district court, it's the judge who's actually sitting as the jury in a criminal case. So we have not been as affected as the superior court level has been. We can still conduct our criminal trials because we're sitting as the jury, but Courtroom capacity is very limited at this time. I think in Moore County, we can only let up to 21 people in the courtroom at one time. And in Hope County, it's only 18 people in the courtroom. And we went from having probably criminal dockets, anywhere between 125 to up to 250 criminal defendants a day. And now we've really had to cut that back just to make sure that we can ensure people's safety in the courtroom by maintaining social distancing. So now we have made it to where we have 2 calendar calls in criminal court. We have a 9:30 a.m. calendar call and a 2 p.m. calendar call to make sure that we can get in as many people as possible. But that still slowed down the process in making sure that people can have trials, because when you start to have trials, you have to make sure that you have witnesses and victims present, and then that further limits the number of people that you have in the courtroom. So we're really making sure that right now we're prioritizing addressing criminal cases where the defendant is in custody, so that they're not having to spend any additional time in custody to have and while waiting to have their cases heard. So we are very cognizant of how this has affected everybody, and we are doing our best to work through it. I think I've done almost 3 weeks of family court just in September to try to make sure, that we're doing everything that we can to help, families in Moore County. And we understand and we're with everybody, and we really hope that eventually things will one day get back to normal.
Thank you so much. And our last question that was sent in advance, in your opinion, should judgeships be voted on a partisan or a nonpartisan basis? And would you please explain your position?
Yeah, so when I first moved to North Carolina, I believe that judge races were nonpartisan, and then it changed 2 years ago in 2018, they became partisan elections. And I guess it goes back to what I was saying when we're talking about, people's mistrust of the system. And I'm a district court judge, so I'm a trial judge. People are coming in front of me and I'm hearing their cases and I'm making their decisions. I'm not an appellate judge, evaluating the constitutionality of statutes. I have a statute, I apply it to the facts in the case in front of me, and that's where I base my decision off of. And so I'm uncomfortable with, sort of implying that just because you're from a certain political party, that's going to influence how you rule on certain cases. When you take your oath as a judge, you're taking an oath to be fair and impartial, to not be swayed by any type of partisan politics. And so I think by injecting party affiliation into judicial races, that's actually really going against what the judicial code of conduct actually tells a judge you're supposed to do. So I think that people can still become educated on how judges view, the law and other types of positions that they may have. But I am uncomfortable with people using party affiliation to sort of determine how they think a judge may rule, because our duty is really to the Constitution and not to any type of party platform.
Well, thank you so much for that. We have just a few minutes left, and I'm going to just ask you, we had some questions that were submitted by voters, and I'll just ask one here. And this is more of a personal nature, but can you recall an instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma? And if so, could you tell us how you resolved it?
Sure. So ethical dilemmas, thankfully, as a judge, I haven't had many come up, but I will say that because I was with the district attorney's office for almost 10 years, when I'm in court, I see a lot of people that I've already interacted with as a prosecutor. And so I'm always very aware of how that person is perceiving me now in my role as a judge. And so sometimes I recognize somebody and they may not necessarily recognize me. And so I always make sure that I put on the record, hi, Mr. Doe, you may not recognize me. My name is Tiffany Bartholomew. I used to work in the Moore County District Attorney's Office, and we've had some prior interactions. are you comfortable with me hearing, this matter? And it may not be a criminal matter. It may be a matter in juvenile court where we're handling an abuse petition. It may be in 50B court that we're hearing something, but I always just try to make sure that that person is comfortable with me hearing the case. And then I always try to be extra aware on my part. I prosecuted some pretty serious felonies. And if it's somebody that I think, maybe this is not the appropriate case for me to sit on, I have to make sure that I'm also comfortable bringing that out to light and telling the parties in the case, like, I apologize, but I'm going to make sure that another judge hears this case, just because I want to make sure that I'm not taking anything that I learned while I was a prosecutor and maybe having that in the back of my mind as I decide a case.
Thank you for that. I do have one question that I think our voters would be interested in. Do you believe all citizens have adequate access to legal help? And if not, what can be done to provide better and wider access?
So unfortunately, no, I don't think that all of our citizens have access to the legal help that they need. Everybody knows that in the criminal court system, if you're facing any type of jail or prison time, then you have the right to have the court appoint an attorney to help you in your case if you can't legally afford one. But we have criminal matters where people are not looking at any type of jail time, but there can still be serious repercussions for that criminal matter. And those people don't have a right to counsel. So they either have to hire their own attorney or they're going to have to represent themselves. And it's very difficult for somebody without any type of legal background to come into court and properly represent themselves. So there's a need there. And then on the criminal side, you're not entitled to a court-appointed attorney in any situation other than one in which you're facing contempt. So if you haven't followed a court order, even in a civil case, but that's a quasi, criminal action. But other than that, in a custody action, you don't get an attorney. So you either have to, like I said, you have to hire your own, or you're going to have to represent yourself. And I find that when I'm in family court and handling custody matters, that is the most serious thing going on in that person's life at that time. And it can be very difficult for them, if they're not familiar with the court system, to know the rules of evidence, to know how to actually get witnesses to come to court to support their case. And so there's definitely a need out there. I know that there's been a push to sort of have some, we refer to them as self-represented or pro se litigants, to have some packets made that kind of can give them some step-by-step procedure about what's going to happen without giving any type of legal advice, but just making them familiar with the procedure that's going to be happening in the courtroom. And then legal aid is available to help certain people when they come into court. But there's definitely still a need out there for people to have representation in very important cases.
Thank you so much for that. Judge Tiffany, would you like to take a few minutes to tell voters why they should vote for you in this election?
Sure. So when I began, I stated that this race really comes down to who can you trust to make these important decisions. And I know that I'm the most qualified candidate to make those decisions. I graduated at the top of my law school class. I was managing editor from Law Review. Since becoming an attorney, I've had numerous hours of training. I actually did a digital evidence class that was done by the Secret Service to learn about digital evidence, which is just coming up in a variety of cases: criminal cases, custody cases, domestic violence cases. I've also been trained by experts up at UNC when it comes to evaluating child abuse cases and physical and sexual abuse. And so I have that type of background that's so essential. When you are having a judge who's sitting in domestic violence court, where we handle domestic violence protection orders, it's essential that you have a judge who actually understands the dynamics of domestic violence. When you have a judge who's in juvenile court handling abuse, neglect, and dependency cases, you need a judge who has my type of background in handling child welfare cases. And in criminal cases, you definitely want a judge who knows the law. And I'm actually a certified instructor in criminal justice for the state of North Carolina. So when people come into the courtroom, they know that they have a judge who's going to know the law, and not only know the law, but apply it fairly in their case. And so really it comes down to what my judicial philosophy is. And they're the very words that are actually written on the United States Supreme Court. And that's equal justice under the law. And a vote for Tiffany is a vote for equal justice.
Thank you again. And just one more thing. If viewers still have questions, is there a way that they could contact you?
Yeah, so I do have a website. I have a website, keepjudgetiffany.com, and there should be a way to contact my campaign if they are interested in doing that. You can also reach out to me on Facebook. It's just under my name, Tiffany Bartholomew.
Thank you again. And that concludes our conversation with Judge Tiffany Bartholomew today. Thank you all for watching. Now, please be sure to vote. It's not only your right and your responsibility, it's your constitutionally guaranteed privilege. Every vote counts, is equally important, and helps to ensure the protection and preservation of our democracy. And you can visit voteforone.org for your online voter guide, where you can get important candidate and voting information. And remember, you can vote in person at any one of the 4 early voting sites in Moore County from the 15th of October through the 31st, or you can vote in person on Election Day, November 3rd, at your regular polling place, or you can vote by mail-in absentee ballot. And for more information about voting and mail-in absentee ballots, please contact the Moore County Board of Elections.